At times you may find yourself in a situation where you'd like to import topography from a paper drawing or say a PDF or something of that nature into your SketchUp drawing and end up with representation of the actual lay of the land, if you will. In SketchUp Free, which I guess we're calling Make these days, it does not have the capability of importing a AutoCAD DWG file or DWF file. So how do we get from that problem to this solution? You may have a situation where you'd like to show the building and understand the relationships of the building to the site, which is the whole point typically of creating that topography. So how do we get there? Initially what we'll do is create a rectangle, a face if you will, for importing the image file that we'd like. So just using the rectangle tool, we'll draw a rather arbitrary rectangle, and that will be our basis for starting this project. As I cannot import PDF directly into SketchUp, I have to do something to fix that. So what I'm going to do is open Photoshop. Now in Photoshop, I'll go to File and Open, and find my PDF. So here we go. Find it here, hit Open. There it is. OK. Take a second, and here's my Photoshop version of that PDF. Again, I can't import this directly into SketchUp, so really all I want to do here is convert this to a format that SketchUp will be happy with. So File, Save As, and you'll see it. Photoshop's trying to save this as a PSD, which is a standard Photoshop file format. You'll see essentially the same thing. So go to the pull down and select JPEG, which SketchUp is very happy with. Select that and you see the format changes and hit save. Now I already had that in there, so it's going to try to resave it, which it did. Okay, once I have this is now a JPEG. I really don't need Photoshop anymore, so I'll get rid of that. And I'll go back to SketchUp. So I have this essentially a face that I can import that information onto. Go to File, Import, and here's our JPEG that we just created in Photoshop. So click on that and select Open, and we'll get that image. Basically, it's a texture image. As you can see, when I'm outside of that face, it will not allow me to attach anything to the SketchUp background. As soon as I get on that face, you get a little paint bucket tool, and it's obviously happy. So click on the bottom left corner, holding the mouse button down, we'll drag this out until we get to the other side and simply let go. So you will find that you're probably going to end up with some extraneous information. We'll use the move tool and drag this out, staying on axes. And I just got off axes. So we can shrink the size of this face to something manageable. I'll just do that on 3 sides. I'm going to maintain that street information for later. So we have it. At this point, however, we do not actually know if this is to scale. So in order to fix that, to reassure ourselves that it is to scale, we'll use the tape measure tool and pick on one corner of the property. Drag this out to the other corner of the property, which is way down here, and click. So you can see that says 81'7", We'll click again. At this point, I can type in the proper dimension, which is the 137.82. So type in 137.82 feet and hit enter. You'll get a window from SketchUp that says, do you want to resize the model? And here you say yes. So we now have this information appropriately in our drawing. We can check this with the tape measure tool again if you'd like. You'll find I think you'll be pretty accurate the first time around, but it's good to check. 137.82 would be a 137.10. Actually, we're really close, so we're good. If you have a problem with that, you can do that a couple of times, and that will, reassure you that you're in good shape. So what do we want to do first? First thing I want to do, this is all black, and it's kind of difficult to trace black on top of black. So I'll go to my Styles dialog box, and you see it shows the color here as black. Make sure you're on edges and go down to the color box and move this over to red or yellow or whatever color you are more happy with. I like red. Now you'll notice that the preview box is still black. That's because the slider here is all the way at the bottom. Any color that you move all the way to the bottom here, full intensity, will be black. So I'll slide this all the way to the top so I get pure red. I'll say OK. Now you'll notice this box has changed to red, so we're good. If you don't have that Styles box, go to Window, Styles, and that box will appear for you. You can see the edge of the rectangle here is already taken on that property. So what do I want to do first? I want to trace the property itself. And you'll see as I draw now, these lines are red. And over black, it's much easier to see red on top of black than it is black on top of black. And do as good a job as you can to trace the property lines, picking the corners, and bring that out to the last corner. Now you'll notice I have an arc here, a curve if you will. It must be a cul-de-sac or something. So I'm going to use the arc tool, pick point 1 and point 2, and then just drag this over to approximate that curve. Now what I have is the property now highlighted or cut out of this base. Next step is I'd like to trace the house, but you'll notice the house is skewed to everything else in this drawing. So to allow me to draw this perpendicular and square, I would use the axis tool. You take the axis tool and that'll drag in this, pretty typical red, green, blue axis that you're used to seeing. And I'm going to place it on a corner. And then it will allow you to rotate the red and green. So to get this as much as you can correctly, go out as far as you can with that red. The green, if you notice, is already pretty well aligned. We'll just carry that out. So you see the axis now has been reoriented to the house. Very simple now to trace the whole house and accomplish 90-degree corners because the axis is in the right spot. You can actually plug in these dimensions as you might want to do to be more accurate. I usually don't find that to be very necessary. And we'll trace all the way around the house. Here, because I started at this corner, I'm going to let that run wild and just let these cross. So you can see I've created a face out of the house. I'll eliminate that extra geometry. And so now I have the property and I have the house. Now, next thing I'd like to do right away is I want to maintain this basic information as well as creating this topography in the end. So I'm going to duplicate this straight up Just going to copy it straight up and about 200 feet above. So I'll just type in 200 feet. The 200 feet is just adequate number to get me where I want to go, out of the way, if you will. So I have the lot and the house, and I still need the topography. So what we'll do with this is we will essentially, with the line tool, trace that topography. Again, come as close as possible as you can. You may have to zoom in, make sure it says on face as you do this. SketchUp tends to want to draw points wherever it wants, and it tends to want to stay on axes, which obviously here we're not doing. Watch for that blue. You don't want that. You'll get out of whack with the world. And just trace every one of these topo lines. So as you go through this, you're going to be cutting faces out of the base face that we drew initially. Once in a while you see it say parallel, you'll get a pink line. Generally that works okay as long as you actually want it parallel. So you'll see now we have faces being cut, and we'll have to continue this all the way through. Again, accuracy is not necessary to be perfect. Straight lines are fine. You don't need to use arcs unless you're really concerned about that, but you'll see in the end that the interpolation of this site by SketchUp really doesn't require perfection or require arcs. So I keep drawing this as we move along. A little tedious, but in the end it's very well worthwhile. A lot easier than drawing this from scratch. So bear with me. Parallel works there. And you can see it's cutting those faces out as we go. See that blue show up? We don't want that. Make sure you don't draw on the blue axis because you're not going to get what you're hoping for. You can interpolate a little bit as you go. Don't worry about tracing perfectly. Make sure you do connect to the edges, so you do cut these faces out. You could pick up this external or peripheral geometry if you want, if it becomes important to something that you're working on here. At this point, I'm just going to concern myself with the actual site. So we go on around the whole building and do the same thing. There's a little bit of topography in this, so it'll take a little bit of time. But again, in the end, it'll be of value. I like to check these as I go, make sure I actually have cut the face. It's kind of easy to find yourself getting off that face. Make sure it does say on face as you do this. Okay, I'm going to stay on the left side of the house here for a little bit. Stop having to zoom in and out so much. Now, when I get to the house, I do want this topography to run through. So that's 697. That's 697. So I'm going to connect this to 698 here. May as well. assume I have that right. I could look at the original PDF and verify that I have these topos in the right place, the right numbers. But I'm not going to worry about that here for this video. I do want to cut right through the house because I want that topography not to get messed up by the house. You'll see later that the tool we're going to use in SketchUp would actually treat that rather badly if I essentially leave a hole in the middle of this site plan. So again, go right through the house. Making sure you do hit the edges of the house and hit the edges of the site. You want all these to intersect properly so you have the right faces happening. Check these from time to time. Make sure you're getting what you think you are getting. This dark black thing is actually a retaining wall that will have to be drawn in. So I think I'm going to do that now so I have an edge to work with. Now I want this line that I'm going to draw to be parallel to that one, so I'm going to reference that edge and you'll get an inference, so I'm good there. Another little straight piece here, I guess. Okay, and then I have, I guess what I'll assume to be somewhat straight here. Okay, and then there's an arc in here, which I'll draw with the arc tool. And again, just approximate this. We don't have to be perfect. So I'll continue with this topography. And you can see I'm interpolating that somewhat. It will get fuzzy on you. You have to wear your super glasses to do this sometimes. Let's see, where were we over here? We're almost there. A little bit more to do. Okay, now remember I want to connect this topography through the house so I don't end up with a hole. I'm going to let that one go there. I'll let this one go here and let this one go here. So I've created faces inside this house. You'll see why later. The last piece of topography is here. So we'll trace that. Okay. Now I should have everything. All the parts and pieces are there. Looks good. Okay, so I have the topography, I have the house, and I have the property properly sized. In order to get this topography to work, we're going to take these chunks and just move them up. This is a 12-inch increment on this topography. Now I'll bring the first one up 12 inches. The second one I'll pull up and I'll inference or reference that first one and then add 12 inches to it. So you can do this in SketchUp anytime you're doing similar push-pulls and you want them to match. You just reference the one that you want it to match, and it makes things go a lot faster. Wrong one. Pull this one up and 12 inches added to it. So you can see what's happening. I'm starting to create this stair step kind of thing. Pull this part up, and that needs to match that. Pull this one up, add a foot to it. Okay. So I'm going to inference that. Come up here, match that. And you can see this can go pretty quickly. There's a little chunk down in here. Needs to come up. So just carry this through the whole site. Bear with me. Almost there. Okay. Now I'm going to bring this last piece up 12 inches as well. Now I want to get to this retaining wall and bring this up to an appropriate height. Let's add 6 inches to that. I didn't quite get it where I want. Okay. I've got a lot of stuff in the SketchUp file, so we're going to have to wait a second for my computer to catch up with me. Dum-de-dum-de-dum, right? Wait for this thing to get its stuff together. There we are. Okay, so it has moved that retaining wall up. I want to go about 6 inches higher than that. There we go. Okay. So what we've created is a bunch of steps here. And we have the topography as you might imagine it. Now, I mean, you can work with this. This is sort of cool, kind of like the old models we did when we were in college, if you're of that age. But most likely you'd want to be a little more accurate with this. I'm going to erase the extraneous site information. And also I want to erase all these faces, these flat faces and the edges. All I want to do is end up with these ribbons. So I'm going to go ahead and eliminate these extraneous faces here. Any edges, any lines. Because when we get to the sandbox tools, which we're going to use to create this topography, it's not real happy with that kind of stuff. Looks like I missed a couple pieces of topo over here. So I'll bring these up. fix that. Go through and erase all these items. Again, it's extraneous to what we're trying to do. All the front edges, the back edges. I'm going to keep that edge just so I maintain that whole property edge. Hopefully that won't be a mistake, but we'll find out. Okay. So some of this is a little tedious, but believe me, it's well worth the time. If you're trying to draw this from scratch and rework this whole thing, you would be spending a lot more time. Hopefully I don't miss anything. I'm going a little bit fast so I don't bore you to death. Eliminate that face. One of the things that these faces will do is they'll start duplicating when you go to the sandbox tool. Okay, I think I have it all. A little bit over here. Actually, that may be okay, because that's that retaining wall, so I have kind of a tall face, tall ribbon, if you will. So what we've got now is a bunch of ribbons as such that approximate the topography of the site. Okay, so at this point it's actually, we're down to the nitty-gritty. We can drop a shell that will interpolate this topography using the sandbox tool. So what I'm going to do is highlight this whole thing, select it all, and I'll go to my sandbox tools, which are here. I'll just drag this out for you. If you don't have the sandbox tool showing, go to View, Toolbars, and look for sandbox tools and make sure it's checked. It is here in this case, obviously. That will bring you up with this little dialog box. The first item here is from contours. That's what we want. I'll just click on that. And SketchUp will make a shell over this whole thing. So our little stair steps are now interpolated smoothly. That shell can be moved off if you'd like. It is essentially a group here at this point. And you can pull it off separately if you'd like. I tend to leave it. Now, if you'd like to see what's really going on here, you go to Hidden Geometry, View, Hidden Geometry, and you can see what's happening. It's triangulated this whole site. Now, I left a little piece of edge on there. That didn't seem to hurt anything, but if you have too much edge on here, it's going to try to pick all of that up and get all these funky triangles going on, and you may get some additional geometry. Now we have some here. This is out in the street, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this using the eraser tool. And you can see there it's got a little bit more than I want. Yeah, maybe that's too much. No, that's okay. So you can see the arc that I created in the first place and how Sandbox has tried to kind of tack on some information. And that's not unusual. Okay, so there's our cul-de-sac. We've got that a little more clear. That's the topo. We're done. It wasn't that hard. It didn't take that long. Or we have the topography here now. Now remember, I kept the site information with the house and everything up above. I can, with another sandbox tool here called Drape, I can select that, drop it on here, and you will see how I've transferred these lines here, the information for that house, onto the site. So I now have a footprint, if you will, for that information. So it's not really too difficult. You can do that with driveways or sidewalks or really any kind of other element that you may have. You can see the retaining wall is a little goofy because it's tried to interpolate that information. If you need to at some point and you want to clarify this, you could eliminate these faces and potentially come back in and add some faces. You need to make triangles to do this. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm reshaping the topography here. Triangles would be necessary. Now I'm not going to redo that whole thing, but you see what you can do. So sandbox isn't going to be perfect, but it can be close, and you may have to mess with this a little bit, clarify these kinds of issues. So now you can see the retaining wall starting to show a little better, and the grade on either side is showing. So what I'm doing is picking up these stairs, these steps that we had before, just connecting them together and triangulating that. Okay, so now the retaining wall shows a little better. I mean, obviously I've got to keep doing that. I'll just approximate it. So you can pick up all these faces if you like. Now that face is missing. I think I messed this up a little bit by going too fast. But you get the idea. You can change this topography to match what you would prefer it to be in the end, or what it really should be. See, what looks like it's attached isn't necessarily attached. So we can keep doing that on and on and on and on. I can reverse these faces if I like by selecting them, right click, and reverse face. So I get rid of that kind of goofy stuff that's going on there. So what we've done is created steps, we've created the topography, and we've superimposed the house profile on there. Now let's see if I go out somewhere here. Let's see, I may have turned that house layer off. Yeah. So I have my house. I can move this guy, maybe a prefabricated building you've done, and drop it on. Where's my topography? Oh, I guess I already did that. So I dropped it on that spot. I guess that's a different topography that's in here. There, we're down here. I'm going to pick up that house and move it. And as you recall, I created that footprint on the topo that we made, which is right there. So I dropped the house on it. And you can see it's a little out of whack here because the garage door is too high. But I'll take this whole thing and move it down and get it about where it should be. So now I have the house relationship to the site. Everything's still red here, but you can change that back to black if you'd like, simply by going to the styles, color, and dropping that back to black. So now you have, something that might be a little easier to look at. As you can see, there's some dropping off going on here. You may at some point decide that you'd like maybe to put a deck in here to accommodate that. And this is, the import of this kind of thing. So there may be a deck that comes out and around, maybe come around the corner. But you have the insight to do this now. You're not having to guess. So I won't draw the whole deck, but you get the idea. That's basically it. You get your site, you get your house. We do have the hidden geometry still on. If that bothers your eye, you can turn that off and just get smooth geometry. At this point, if you wanted, you could go under here and eliminate all these ribbons, whatever you'd like to do. That's it. If there's any questions or concerns or thoughts, or maybe you think I've done something differently than you might expect, feel free to ask questions on the YouTube presentation on the file there, and I'll do what I can to respond and answer your questions. Thank you for watching, and look for Sketchucator on YouTube. Thanks, and have a great day.